It sat there like any other piece of mail, white, narrow, harmless. But I knew better. It wasn't the kind of envelope you opened while finishing coffee or halfway through your to-do list. It was the kind you opened when you were ready to sit with whatever came out of it. The autumn light filtered through the gauzy curtains in our apartment, catching little floating specks in the air. Matt had made fresh coffee, and a blueberry muffin, now half been shared, sat untouched between us. He was bent over the seating chart, pencil in hand, frowning a little in that way he did when something didn't quite add up. His left leg bounced slightly under the table. "What if we put Rachel next to Uncle Henry?" he asked, circling names with soft intent. "They actually talked at the engagement dinner, didn't they?" I nodded, distracted. My eyes kept drifting to the envelope, lying just inches from my coffee mug. On the front, in unmistakable cursive, was my mother's handwriting, tight, even elegant. Just 2 words, private. Mom. Above our table was a framed photo from my college graduation. I was standing in a blue robe, smiling despite the hollow in my chest. Jasmine, my best friend, had flown in from DC to cheer me on. My parents weren't there. They'd chosen a trip to New York that weekend to visit Megan and attend some violin showcase. At the time, I told myself it was fine, just bad timing. These days, I knew better. Some absences aren't logistical, they're deliberate. Matt glanced up and followed my gaze. "You okay?" he asked gently. "Just thinking," I said, managing a smile. He didn't push. That was one of the reasons I loved him. He knew when to wait and when to stay close without needing an explanation. We moved on to cake options and centerpieces, flipping through tabs and vendor flyers until the light began to slant differently through the windows. Still, the envelope sat untouched beside my mug, like it was waiting for silence. That night, after Matt had gone to bed early, he had a site visit in the morning. I sat alone in the living room, legs curled beneath me, the envelope finally in my hands. I didn't rip it open. I sliced gently along the edge with the corner of a takeout menu and slid out a single sheet of paper. Typed, not handwritten. My heart already sank. "Dear Rachel, given the nature of family and the importance of balance, your father and I have discussed a proposal that we believe would serve everyone involved. We recommend reallocating a portion, specifically $30,000, of your wedding fund to support Megan's upcoming ceremony. She's doing her best, but her circumstances are not as fortunate as yours. We know you'll do the right thing. Love, Mom." I read it twice, then a third time. There was no "would you consider?" No, we know this is difficult. Just that firm, polished tone my mother had perfected, dressed like concern but trimmed with entitlement. "You have enough. She has less. That's how family works." That was the unspoken rule in our house. Not fairness, balance. And somehow I was always the scale to be tipped. I stood up and crossed the room. In the corner, beside the bookshelf, was a cream-colored storage box wrapped with a soft gold ribbon. Inside were our wedding brochures, fabric samples, invitation proofs, months of planning, quietly built and neatly categorized. I laid the letter on top of the stack like I was placing something heavy onto something fragile. Then I rewrapped the ribbon and tied it slowly into a knot. Not tight. Not angry. Just final. Matt shuffled out of the bedroom in his socks, rubbing one eye. He paused when he saw me sitting there, box in lap, coffee long gone cold. He didn't ask what the letter said. He never asked things that didn't need to be asked. Instead, he sat beside me, close but not too close, and said, "Are you going to let her do this?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the ribbon, still taut between my fingers, and gave it one last pull. I always thought guilt was something you felt deep inside, a weight on your chest, a shadow in your mind. But that morning, as I sat across from Sam sipping coffee in the sunlit corner of our favorite cafe, I realized guilt could be financial, too. Tangible and cold as the papers we'd soon have to face. Sam had been a steady presence through all this. My Rockwind family felt like quicksand. She was pragmatic, warm, with a way of cutting through the noise. Just because it's family doesn't mean it's fair, she said quietly, as if that truth was something she'd repeated to herself too many times to count. Her words hung between us, mingling with the scent of fresh cinnamon rolls and steaming lattes. Outside, the crisp fall air wrapped Charlottesville in a golden glow, and the farmer's market was just beginning to buzz a few blocks away. "I want to check on that account," I said at last, voice steady despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "I need to know if it's really mine, not just in spirit." Sam nodded approvingly. "That's where it starts, knowing what you actually own." The following morning, I found myself standing inside the wood-paneled Blue Ridge Federal Bank, surrounded by the quiet hum of old fluorescent lights and the faint scent of pine cleaner. The kind of place where time felt slower, less rushed, yet the stakes felt impossibly high. Carol, the bank officer, was efficient but polite, her eyes scanning my ID with practiced neutrality. "You have had sole ownership of this account since you turned 18, she confirmed, clicking through the digital records. "It's a custodial account, but it matured and was transferred to you legally years ago." I nodded, barely breathing. Somehow, hearing it out loud made it feel real, like a small crack in the wall I'd been pressing against for years. Leaving the bank, I didn't feel triumphant. Instead, a strange cocktail of shame and relief washed over me. I'd never dared hope for clarity in this mess, and yet now that I had it, the silence around it felt heavier. Later that afternoon, Sam and I wandered through the farmer's market. Stalls bursting with pumpkins, jars of honey capped with cloth, and bunches of lavender tied neatly with twine lined the lanes. The scent of cinnamon drifted from a bakery tent nearby, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly harvested herbs. Without a word, Sam handed me a small paper sachet tied with a lavender string. "For clarity," she said with a gentle smile. "Sometimes you need more than facts." I took it with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of her kindness. Back home, I sank into the worn couch, the lavender sachet resting on the coffee table beside my unopened phone. Then it lit up. A text from Mom. True family shares, especially when one sister is drowning. My heart thundered, the old familiar pang of guilt trying to claw its way back. But this time, my mind was clearer. I stared at the words long and hard. After what felt like an eternity, I typed back, "No, Mom." The answer is no. My fingers hovered over the send button, and then I pressed it. The reply came almost instantly. "You'll regret this at my birthday." I didn't respond. Instead, I slid my phone aside and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain to let the cool October breeze wash over me. The air smelled of fallen leaves and wood smoke, reminders that seasons change, and sometimes, so must we. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without the familiar weight of silence pressing down. Setting boundaries wasn't easy, and it wasn't painless. But it was necessary. I was beginning to choose clarity over guilt, light over shadow. In this life, rough days can weigh you down, but there's always room for grace if we remember to care for each other. My mother didn't toast people. She cornered them, with crystal glasses raised high and words weighted like lead. The kind of praise that felt more like a trap than celebration. It was early December, a Friday night with the chill of winter teasing the edges of Charlottesville. The Italian restaurant was dimly lit, soft flickers of candlelight casting long shadows across polished wood tables. Vintage jazz filled the space, looping quietly, elegant, but slightly out of time, like the carefully curated image my mother loved to present. Guests began arriving, smiles polished and cautious. Diane played the perfect hostess, her posture rigid but graceful, eyes scanning the room with the sharpness of a hawk. Megan, her silent accomplice, sat nearby, her smile tight and knowing. I sat beside Matt, who gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. His quiet presence was my anchor amid the gathering storm. When Diane stood to speak, the room fell silent instantly. She lifted her glass, voice smooth and cold as crystal. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, especially to celebrate Megan's upcoming engagement. And I must say, we are so fortunate that Rachel has generously offered to share part of her wedding fund to help Megan's ceremony. The applause was polite but hesitant, like a ripple over still water. I felt the eyes of the room shift to me, some expectant, others judgmental. I stood slowly, voice steady but soft. That's not true. For a moment, the air thickened as Diane's smile faltered. She stepped forward, attempting to smooth the moment with practiced ease. Now, darling, let's not make this uncomfortable, Megan added, voice dripping with false sweetness. Rachel already has Matt. I have nothing. The words hit like a slap. But before I could respond, Diane's hand came down sharply across my cheek. The sound was crisp, a breaking glass, a sudden crack in the polished veneer of the evening. The restaurant froze. Forks hovered midair. The music stuttered and stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned to Sam, who had been watching silently from across the table. Call Olivia, I said quietly. I want to file charges tonight. The room was too stunned to move. I folded my napkin carefully, placed it on the table beside my untouched plate, and walked out. Step by step, the echo of my footsteps down the hall was louder than anything I could have said. The courthouse wasn't grand. It was an unremarkable building in downtown Charlottesville, beige walls, old carpet, the faint scent of toner and nerves hanging in the air. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone might finally listen. I sat on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, the thick legal folder heavy in my lap. My hands were folded tightly over it, knuckles pale. My heart thudded quietly, a steady drumbeat beneath the clamoring noise of my thoughts. Matt was beside me, calm as ever, sitting with one leg crossed over the other, eyes steady and reassuring. He didn't try to fill the silence, he never did. His presence alone said, I trust you'll be ready when you're ready. When I was 12, Mom had pulled me aside in the kitchen after a school talent show. I'd messed up a song, forgotten the words, and felt humiliated. She'd said, don't make scenes. People don't forget them. That line echoed louder in this courthouse hallway than the judge's gavel ever could. The clerk called my name. I rose slowly, clutching the folder, and followed her through the heavy wooden doors. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and stale air. Rows of empty benches stretched ahead, except for a handful of reporters murmuring quietly in the back. Across the aisle, Mom sat composed in a pale lilac jacket, hands folded neatly on her lap, her face a mask of brittle control. Megan sat beside her, chin lifted, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the judge's bench. Olivia Brooks stood beside me at the plaintiff's table. She adjusted her blazer, but didn't look down at her notes. I didn't need her to. Her confidence steadied me. This isn't about revenge, she whispered. It's about boundaries. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp glasses and tired eyes. She scanned the docket quickly, then motioned for us to proceed. Olivia opened with precision. Your Honor, this is not a case about emotion or family drama. It is a case about accountability for a public act of physical assault witnessed by multiple parties and recorded on video. Mom's lawyer, a man in his 60s with a forced smile, countered smoothly. Your Honor, what occurred was a regrettable family disagreement, a moment of passion misinterpreted by the public eye. The video played on the large screen. The slap landed sharply, the sound crisp and undeniable. The camera caught my cheek turning red, my silent stillness afterward. The room seemed to hold its breath. Olivia handed over medical records, photos of the bruising, doctor's notes dated within 12 hours of the incident. Then came written statements from witnesses, Jasmine, my best friend, and the waiter who had seen the scene unfold. Mom was asked to speak. She stood, voice steady but void of warmth. I am deeply sorry if my daughter felt harmed. That was never my intention. I have always tried to raise my girls with discipline and love. Sometimes strong emotions can be misunderstood. Her eyes didn't meet mine. The judge sat back, silent for a moment, then spoke without raising her voice. Miss Linwood, physical assault, regardless of context or intent, is not protected by familial ties. The law does not exempt what society politely ignores. She continued with the ruling. Margaret Linwood is fined $2,000, ordered to complete an 8-week anger management course, and shall maintain no contact with Miss Linwood for 6 months. Mom blinked once, then slowly gathered her purse and turned without acknowledging anyone, not the judge, the court, nor me. Megan followed, still expressionless. Outside the courtroom, Megan caught my eye and said with a sharp edge, "You made her look like a monster." I met her gaze calmly, my voice steady. I didn't need to. She did that herself. For the first time in a long time, I exhaled, not relief, not triumph, just breath. Control was slowly returning to my hands. When people realize they've lost control of you, they try to control how others see you. Matt had said that to me once, his voice low and steady during one of those rare quiet moments between the chaos. Truth doesn't need volume, he'd told me. It just needs time. February in Charlottesville carried a sharp edge to the air, the promise of spring just out of reach. Our apartment was a jumbled mix of wedding supplies and half-packed boxes. Invitations stacked next to unopened floral arrangements, fabric swatches folded and tucked beside spreadsheets with guest lists and seating charts. The chaos of planning was never supposed to be like this. Then the calls started. My cousin Melissa was the first. Her voice was laced with confusion and concern. Rachel? I just got an email saying your wedding's been canceled. What happened? I blinked at my phone, disbelief washing over me. Canceled? No, that's not true. But the doubt had already started to settle. The email looked official enough. A simple message from what appeared to be my personal Gmail address, except it wasn't. The font was off, the grammar awkward, the sender's address a near match, but not mine. It had spread through my contacts like wildfire, whispers turning into murmurs. I shared the message with Matt. His face tightened, but instead of anger, there was a quiet resolve. We need to find out who did this. We hired Ryan Trent, a digital investigator with a reputation for being thorough and discreet. He showed up at the apartment a few days later, tie pulled just a little too tight, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ryan worked quickly, tracing the IP address. It led to a co-working space in Charlotte, Megan's territory. Not a smoking gun, but a clear lead. 2 days later, Matt's phone buzzed with another jarring surprise, photoshopped images of me, awkwardly edited to appear as if I were with another man. Alongside them, messages accusing me of betrayal. I stared at the screen, the weight of it threatening to crush my composure. But Matt's hand on my shoulder steadied me. "We stand still," he said quietly. "Let the truth catch up." That night, I sat at my laptop and wrote a public message to everyone on our guest list and beyond. Clear, calm, professional. No accusations. No rage. I attached screenshots of the fake email and photos, each marked with a bold watermark that read fake. I hit send and leaned back, exhaustion settling deep in my bones. Support started to flow in almost immediately. Friends and family responded with messages like, "I knew something was off," and "proud of how you handled this." It was a tide turning quietly but firmly. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to be clear. Then, a final text from Ryan. "MAC address from the fake email matches a laptop leased to Megan's apartment." I read the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Without a word, I pressed save. The battle was no longer just emotional, it was a matter of truth. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Outside, the early February sky was darkening. I felt a strange sense of peace amidst the storm. In moments like these, I realized the truest strength isn't in fighting back with fire. It's in standing still, letting facts speak louder than fury, and choosing to rise above the noise. I didn't need revenge. What I needed was space, a place where no one felt entitled to my silence, where my voice didn't have to compete with expectation or obligation. Sam had once told me, peace doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up in lavender and fresh boughs. That phrase lingered with me as the morning light filtered softly through the trees of the small garden behind the historic inn where Matt and I had chosen to say our vows. The garden was quiet but alive. Lavender bushes swayed gently in the breeze, their purple blooms punctuating the rustic wooden arch that framed the stone path. Around us, 30 guests sat in a wide semicircle, the chairs arranged simply, without pomp or podium. There were no microphones, no grand speeches, just the kind of intimacy we'd longed for all along. My heart beat steady as I smoothed the crease of my dress. Matt stood beside me, his presence calm and steady, his hand warm in mine. He was here, fully present, and for the first time in months, so was I. Before the ceremony began, a guard approached quietly and whispered in my ear. Megan had been caught attempting to sneak onto the property, carrying a small backpack filled with perfume, scissors, and cans of spray paint. I glanced at the guard and said simply, "Escort her out." No police. Just no entry. The guard nodded and disappeared down the stone path. Uncle Henry, my father's younger brother, took my hand and led me forward. As we walked, he slipped a small card into my palm. I felt the texture of the paper, the neat handwriting as I folded it gently into my pocket. The officiant spoke softly, her words carrying over the cool morning air. There were no long speeches or toasts, just a simple promise. I will meet you in joy, and I will meet you in struggle, and I will choose you in both. Matt's eyes held mine, steady and unwavering. When the officiant said, "You may kiss," I leaned in without hesitation, knowing this moment was mine. Uninterrupted, unshadowed. Around us, soft music drifted, mingling with the scent of fresh lemon cake and blooming lavender. The world felt suspended in perfect stillness. Later, back at our apartment, I pulled the small card from my pocket. Uncle Henry's handwriting smiled back at me. You chose peace. Keep choosing it. I tucked the card between the pages of our vow book, not because I needed proof, but because sometimes remembrance is its own kind of strength. I didn't win by fighting harder. I won by no longer fighting to be believed. Peace didn't come from victory in court or public validation. It came from walking away with dignity, from holding space for myself, and from choosing joy on my own terms. Sometimes the loudest battles aren't fought with words or fists, but with quiet moments like this, when you stand tall beneath a lavender sky and say yes to your own story. Sometimes peace isn't found in loud victories or dramatic confrontations. It quietly arrives in the choices we make to honor ourselves. As I stood beneath the lavender sky, surrounded by those who truly mattered, I realized that love isn't about control or sacrifice. It's about respect and dignity. If we can learn anything from this journey, it's that family means more than obligation. It's built on empathy, trust, and the courage to set boundaries when love demands it. In life, when we choose kindness over conflict and clarity over silence, healing can truly begin. If this story touched your heart, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts or your own stories of finding peace. Sometimes, sharing is the first step to understanding, and we're never alone when we speak from the heart.